Welcome to the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, where it is never too early for fantasy football. My name is Jeff.
And I'm Alex.
Hey, Alex, how's it going today?
It's going well. We have another day to talk about football news.
We do, and the weather is getting nicer here up north. No, it's always nice down south where you are.
It's getting blistering hot.
Yes. So it's getting nice here, and it's getting uncomfortably hot where you are.
Yeah.
I hope everyone had a good, healthy, happy Memorial Day as we remembered those who made the greatest sacrifice for us. And as always, thank you for downloading, listening, liking, and commenting on our podcast videos. Please subscribe to us on the socials. We are on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, with the handle at N2EFantasy. Alex, what do we got on today's show?
Today, we have the Cardinals releasing DeAndre Hopkins. We have the Vegas Raiders contract with Jimmy Garoppolo that we can discuss because it's got an interesting wrinkle. We have Trey Lance news. We have Anthony Richardson and Gardner Minshew snap counts and who's getting first team reps. We have news about Aaron Rodgers from his time in Green Bay. That's an interesting little rumor / wrinkle that we can talk about. We have Tyler Boyd talking basically bulletin material, so that's interesting, something we can cover. Justin Jefferson might be getting a new contract soon and could be sky high. Kenny Pickett had a burglary incident that we can discuss. John Gruden is apparently giving insight to the Saints coaching staff. We have an update on the gambling suspension stuff upcoming. So these are all things we can dive into. And let's start with someone we've been talking about for several weeks now, DeAndre Hopkins getting released by Arizona. Jeff, what do you make of this? I mean, it's essentially all the cap hit is this year, and then it should be pretty clear for the Cardinals going forward from that point. But what do you think about it? Who are some possible suitors?
So if they would have just waited 2 more days, they could have spread the cap hit over 2 seasons. But I'm still shocked that Arizona ended up cutting Hopkins. Their team's not better without him. They don't need the cap space. In fact, they didn't save any cap space with that dead cap hit. So essentially, they're losing the cap space. They're losing the player. And they really have nothing to show for it. They're not going to get a comp pick for it. And now the attention really turns to where does Hopkins go? And if I'm Hopkins, I am no rush right now. There's no camps don't open for another 6 weeks. Teams have a need at wide receiver. Why not take your time and negotiate? Who are you hearing that's in the mix for Hopkins?
The 2 teams that I've been stomping for weeks and weeks now, the Bills and the Chiefs, seem to be the most likely landing spots. However, they both are strapped for cap right now, so they have to do some other roster moves to make that happen. We're also hearing that the Browns are interested because of the DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun Watson connection from the Houston days. Also, the Houston Texans could be interested. At least Hopkins is not closed the door on that, and he has mentioned in the past, in a recent podcast actually, that Houston might be the only exception to his no rookies rule that he's looking at when looking at a new team. The Patriots are rumored to be interested in, and the Lions could potentially be a fit as well. Jeff, what's most likely how do you feel about these teams and his likeliness of going to one of those teams?
So I think that the Bills and the Chiefs need to keep him away from one another, but the Bills aren't all in yet, which is actually really confusing because all they have right now is Stephon Diggs. They don't really have much else behind Diggs. So Diggs is getting that double coverage, that full coverage. The Chiefs last year have proven that they don't need that alpha wide receiver to win. And now that that's part of the formula, maybe Andy Reid's thought process is, why pay one when you can allocate that funds to your offensive line? Can allocate that funds to Patrick Mahomes, Kelsey. Obviously, Kelsey is considered their number 1 wide receiver, weapon, whatever you want to call them. The Browns, we have the Watson connection there, but I don't really see a lot of targets with the Browns right now, unless they're planning on cutting a few wide receivers, because their wide receiver room is pretty deep right now. Texans are in the race. That is where he was before Arizona. So he does have that connection to them. But does he want to play with a rookie quarterback? Patriots are in the mix, and we'll see what actually comes out of that. But that he has that connection with Bill O'Brien from the Texan days. I know you love Bill O'Brien. I don't see a fit with the Lions either. Doesn't really fit Jared Goff's game. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is the wide receiver that actually fits Goff's game, and the rest just opens up from St. Brown. it'll just be really interesting. But I know you have some feelings you would like to share for Bill O'Brien.
Well, let me just go through the teams real quick. The Chiefs are the place that I wish he'd go to the most. However, with them being strapped for cash, and you got to think that they have Kelsey as their number one. He's plays tight end, but he's really their number one receiver. They have spent two second round picks on Sky Moore and on their rookie wide receiver that they just drafted, Rashee Rice. They traded a third round pick for Kadarius Toney, who everyone seems to think is going to be their lead actual wide receiver. They have Ross as well as a really, really decent deep threat. So maybe they don't feel like they need to go after Hopkins, although I think Hopkins would immediately be the best receiver not named Kelsey on that roster. When you look at the Bills, and like you mentioned, wide receiver wise, they have basically Diggs and Gabriel Davis as their top two wide receivers. Gabriel Davis has proven that he is more of a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 on a roster, and he hasn't quite cut it as a number 2. They do have two good tight ends in Dawson Knox and now their recent rookie, Dalton Kincaid. We don't know what Kincaid is, and even the offensive coordinator has stated they don't know what to do with him yet, which is a weird blurb to let out into the media. Hopkins would immediately be the number 2 there next to Diggs. I think Diggs would be the alpha, and Hopkins would be like a red zone target, like a possessing catch guy who can really take some coverage away and help that team get their passing offense flourishing with Josh Allen. So those are the most ideal places. Those are the two places he'd most likely win a Super Bowl. So they make a lot of sense. It's just they don't have the money. So then you have to go into the next options. Like the Browns might be able to get the money together, but they have one of the deepest wide receiver groups, and they have a bunch of young guys who would then not be able to develop because Hopkins is in the way. And it sounds to me from Kevin Stefanski and from the GM from the Browns that they're not really interested in bringing in Hopkins. It's more of Deshaun Watson trying to recruit him. So maybe they would do it at a discount, which he's not going to give because he wants what OBJ got at a minimum. So we have the Texans who could make the salary work. The Texans and the Bills could both do some flex with next season's cap because they have a lot of cap going into next season. And I think he still has some fondness for the Houston area. He certainly likes the nightlife here, and he has some children out in the Houston area. So I could see him playing. And he did mention the Texans as a potential option, even though they have a rookie. He would be the number 1 wide receiver immediately. So he could get the money. He could help out a rookie quarterback develop. He could help out a bunch of young wide receivers develop their game. So that is potentially an option. I don't see the Patriots as an option because I don't think he likes Bill O'Brien. I don't think he has fond memories from his time with Bill O'Brien and that front office Bill O'Brien assembled with Jack Easterby, who Jack Easterby undermined everything and had the organization trade Hopkins away because of character concerns. So I don't think he actually wants to go to the Patriots. The Lions I could see as a fit for a season because they do have money. They do have a need at wide receiver for a big target. So I could see that potentially being a distant option behind the other ones that we've already listed. They're all interesting options. It's going to be interesting where he ends up falling. I don't think the Ravens are an option. I don't think the Jets are an option. I don't think the Eagles are an option. I know they've all been tied to him in previous reports. Jeff, did I get anything super wrong here, or is that about right?
No, everything sounds right. But I do think that he could take his time over these next 6 weeks, be wined and dined, and he really has no competition on the wide receiver market. So it's not like they could even look elsewhere. If it's not him, then what?
Let's move on to the Las Vegas Raiders, and interesting details of Jimmy Garoppolo's contract was released to the public. Jeff, why don't you break this down for us?
So basically, Jimmy Garoppolo signed a contract that was guaranteed to a certain extent, and they were supposed to do a press conference within a couple of days. That press conference was postponed, and now we're figuring out why it was postponed, because apparently Jimmy's foot was so bad that he could not pass a physical with the Raiders. So they withheld doing the press conference. Also, they converted that guaranteed money into salary this year. So what that means is it's not guaranteed and that he doesn't get it paid up front, anything like that. It has the stipulation that he must pass a physical before the start of the season or his contract is terminated, and they owe him $0. I don't know if this scenario is likely, but it's interesting that this was leaked to the media this past week. So first, assuming Jimmy does get released by the Raiders, and we're going to go down that path first, even though it's the least likely path, what else can the Raiders do at quarterback this year, Alex?
They can bring in your homeboy Carson Wentz. They can save a bunch of money, give him like a 1 year, $10 million deal. Bring in
Done.
DeAndre Hopkins. Be like, all right, you have all the wide receivers. Light it up. See what happens.
I
Earn
mean,
that starting job.
he would just be chucking it down the field.
So, I mean, if I was them, I don't think there's that much of a difference between Jimmy Garoppolo healthy and Carson Wentz at this point. So Carson Wentz has the bigger arm too. So if you want to be competitive with the Chargers, you want to be competitive with the Chiefs, you need someone who can sling the ball, and that's not Jimmy G.
Carson's probably more durable at this point too, to your point.
Yeah, which is crazy to think about.
Well, it's really funny because we actually mocked 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whenever it was. Then Carson Wentz said that he was willing to accept a starter job, a backup job, any role. And you looked at me and said, who's going to offer him a starting job? Well, we might have one right here.
They got shafted because not only is Jimmy G struggling to stay healthy, Tom Brady officially announced he's done playing. He said he's not playing again. He said it. He said it out loud.
How many times can he say it? I'm still not taking him off my sheet. I've heard this song and dance before.
Everyone's waiting for this ownership deal to release the details so we know if he's allowed to play or not.
So it was released this week that he is allowed to play as long as the owners vote to allow him to play. So I would assume that would be part of the league ratification of Brady being an owner, is whether or not he could play or not as well.
Why would the other 31 teams be like, sure, you can play for the Raiders?
I don't know what goes on behind closed doors. There could be a lot of trade and bartering that we don't even know. Vote for my rule. I'll let Tom Brady play.
But yeah, so with Garoppolo having his injury woes, with Tom Brady, we're not sure if he wants to play. We're not sure if he's completely done. We don't know if he's allowed to play. So they don't have any options. And the best available quarterback that's out there, it's either Carson Wentz or it's someone like Cam Newton. So I don't know what direction they'd want to go in, but it doesn't look good for the Raiders. It makes them look a little less competent and makes it look more likely they might be competing for a top pick this year, because that roster does not look great.
Nope. I don't have them at very many wins going into the season, and this makes me a little less confident. So moving from Jimmy's new team to his old team of San Francisco, Trey Lance has been getting the first team snaps over Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold's been taking all the snaps with the number 2. Do you think that this is a hint that we could be moving towards Trey Lance getting the nod on week 1?
So there's recently been some optimism that Brock Purdy might be back in time for week 1. With that said, I'm not sure that that's 100% likely at this point. I think at this stage, Lance is likely to be the one to start week 1. He seems like he's healthy. He's the best quarterback that's available on that roster right now. It makes sense that he starts. Now, whether he keeps the job or whether Brock Purdy takes it over when Brock is healthy remains to be seen. We have to see what Trey Lance is. So in the preseason and the early weeks of the season, if Trey Lance does well, it makes no sense for them to rush Brock Purdy back. So they might let Brock Purdy sit and get healthy. And so we'll see. We'll see how this shakes out. This is something that we're going to have to monitor all through preseason and the early season to see how it goes. But I view Sam Darnold purely as the backup behind those two guys.
Agreed. I mean, it'll be really interesting to see where Shanahan leans, because we do know Shanahan loves his system, and where he feels the best quarterback for his system week 1 will be.
The best quarterback is Christian McCaffrey.
Right? That did not work so well in the postseason.
He wasn't prepared enough, Jeff.
So another quarterback that's getting some first team snaps is Anthony Richardson. He is splitting them currently with Gardner Minshew, which is a sign that they're trending towards potentially having Anthony Richardson start week 1, but we will have to see what kind of happens with that. Your boy, Anthony Richardson, getting first team snaps. What are your thoughts, Alex?
The stars are aligning for him to play, Jeff. He's got a team that's basically tailored for him. They've prepared the roster specifically for him. So I don't see why they wouldn't play him. He's, like I've said, all through the pre-draft process, post-draft, he's the type of guy that, because he has limited college experience, he needs actual game experience. And sitting on the bench will do him no favors. He has to go out there and play. And they've set everything around him up so that he can succeed earlier on. I'm not saying total wins wise. I'm not saying playoff wise year 1. I'm just saying they're giving him enough to be able to learn the offense, get his touchdown, his accuracy going, get the chemistry going with the receiver so he can continue to grow and develop as a quarterback. And he showed promising signs about being able to learn from his plays and defensive coverages. He doesn't let things fool him twice. So there's a lot of encouragement there for the Colts. And I think he will start week 1 over Gardner Minshew, which is a shame because I like Gardner Minshew like you do, but you like him to a higher degree. So I'm sorry, but I don't think Gardner Minshew is going to get much time playing this year.
We will see. There's the other school of thought that if Anthony Richardson does go out and he's unable to gain confidence or anything like it that looks like confidence, that this could actually be more hindrance to him than just sitting and working on his mechanics on the sideline. So there's definitely two schools of thought here. Let's not forget Gardner Minshew actually played with Indy's head coach, so he did follow him for a reason. He does trust Gardner to an extent. So there is that built-in chemistry playbook, everything already built into Gardner Minshew as well. Obviously, Pittman probably wants Gardner Minshew in this game as much as you would hate to admit it, but
it's interesting because Pittman, like you said, would probably want Gardner Minshew, but
mm-hmm.
Pierce would probably want Richardson because Richardson's more of the deep ball thrower. So it's all different. But I think Richardson, they spent the 4th overall pick on him, so I think they're going to play him.
Well, I hope it's the right move because if you remember correctly with Jalen Hurts, he did not play year 1, and he probably benefited from sitting year 1.
There was a better quarterback that was already starting at that point than Gardner Minshew with the Colts. So
hey,
I think it's a little bit
different. Do not mess with Gardner Minshew. Minshew mania.
I'm talking about your boy Carson Wentz, though. Who do you like more, Carson Wentz or Gardner Minshew?
I don't know. I don't know. I like them. I like all of my children equally.
Out of all your children, where does Aaron Rodgers rank, especially after hearing he requested for the Packers GM Brian Gutekunst to be fired or to be traded from the team? So how do you feel about Rodgers kind of pulling that move? Do you agree with it, with him requesting that? How do you feel about how everything played out?
So I think the way everything played out was the correct way. If you remember looking back when Jimmy Garoppolo was drafted, when Tom Brady was still in New England, Tom Brady went and won a Super Bowl and then said, hey, let's get rid of Jimmy. Well, Aaron Rodgers, after drafting Jordan Love, won 2 league MVPs and said he might have even started with, let's get rid of Jordan Love first. But what we do know for sure is he wanted Brian Gutekunst out because he wanted to prove his point that he was right shouldn't have drafted a quarterback yet. Kind of very similar situations, but the front office dealt with it very differently. Green Bay took a hard stance of a no. Now, if Rodgers had won a Super Bowl in those years, it's possible that Rodgers could have won that. Like Brady did win the Super Bowl, which is actually more important than winning the MVP. But Rodgers did the best that he could to win his own individual award. So there is that as well. But I do think Rodgers is now reinvigorated on the Jets. And I do think the Green Bay Packers are in good hands with Jordan Love. Now, I'm not saying Jordan Love is going to be as good as Aaron Rodgers was the last 3 seasons. But what I'm saying is there's a chance that Jordan Love builds chemistry with the wide receivers that Aaron didn't because he missed OTAs. He missed those voluntary workouts. He missed all those times to actually build some really good chemistry. If you remember correctly last year, Christian Watson missed all of preseason. So Aaron Rodgers and Christian Watson did not start playing with each other at all until the regular season. So it's kind of crazy that he didn't get to build any chemistry with his young wide receivers ahead of time. And I think that's something Jordan Love will do. And I think Aaron Rodgers now is being a more active participant on his team, showing up to those voluntary workouts because he needs to learn that playbook and he needs to gain chemistry with a slew of wide receivers. Now, I know he has Lazard and Cobb as holdovers from Green Bay, but I do think that this ended in the correct way and that both teams will be better for it.
I don't think it looks good requesting that your GM gets fired ever. I think that he was just ticked off that, one, they drafted Jordan Love instead of drafting wide receiver help or tight end help or offensive line help or anything like that to actually help Rodgers win games. They drafted a replacement, and to me, it wasn't someone who was very high profile, and I didn't like Jordan Love as a prospect. probably came off kind of insulting, like they were desperate to get another quarterback other than Aaron Rodgers. So I think he took it personally, and he got Brett Favre, which when Brett Favre was there, they drafted Aaron Rodgers late in the first round. Like they did the same thing to Aaron Rodgers now. So he's been on both sides of it, and I think he was ticked off. That doesn't excuse trying to get your GM fired, but at the same time, the GM didn't necessarily do any favors to the team to help them win for the past couple seasons. So now we get to see. I mean, was Aaron Rodgers the reason the Packers won any games, just like Tom Brady with the Patriots, or did the GM make the right call in drafting Love, and they should have turned to Love sooner? We'll see how those two teams play this year, the Packers and the Jets. We'll see how Love versus Aaron Rodgers goes throughout the season. I think Aaron Rodgers will probably have the better record by the end of the year, but who knows? Who knows? So it's something to monitor. But I don't know if you knew this yet, Jeff, but the Jets have already won the Super Bowl. I don't know if you saw Aaron Rodgers' video from the Taylor Swift concert. All the confetti coming down at the end of it, apparently. And he's like, the Jets win the Super Bowl. There, he's already calling it. He's already calling it right now.
He's practicing. He is practicing. But to the point of Aaron Rodgers being upset about that first round pick that you had mentioned, they could have used a lot more than a quarterback with that pick, and I could see where that frustration would come. And Rodgers never got the receiving help that he needed. So that's why he had a need to actually keep the guys that he could close. So that is like Kumaro that went to the Bills, that was Lazard, that's Cobb. He likes to keep his guys close once he builds trust, because it does take him a while to build trust with somebody. But Green Bay really never drafted a wide receiver after Adams that was worth anything. That's not to say that Watson won't be worth anything, but he's still only a year two guy, and he produced a lot of touchdowns last year, but we'll see if he can duplicate it in year two. I need it to be proven to me.
Well, speaking of a potentially proven wide receiver, Tyler Boyd says that if he was healthy in the Bengals versus Chiefs AFC Championship game, the Bengals would have won. Do you agree with that?
Ooh, that's a bold statement from a guy that really doesn't matter too much on the team. Like he's like the sixth or seventh most important guy on offense.
Out of all the guys, yeah, but he's the third wide receiver. He's the second when one of the other two guys is hurt.
Right. But then they have Hayden Hurst, and they had Joe Mixon catching passes, P. Ryan. Like, to say that he would have been, like, they still couldn't get stops on Kansas City to keep them from scoring too many points. So could he have played defensive back? Like, I need to know what he could have done to actually like help them.
I think that's what he's implying. He played both sides. He played special teams. He'd do the kickoffs. Like, he'd do all of it.
Yeah, I think that's big bulletin board material for when the Bengals play the Chiefs now, because the Chiefs shouldn't have a chip on their shoulder after winning the Super Bowl. But now here, Tyler Boyd is sitting there trying to put a chip on the Chiefs' shoulder. And that's not what the Bengals need going into the season. Like they have a much harder schedule than most people realize going into this year. And they're going to have a very hard time winning that division, especially with an improving Cincinnati, an improving Baltimore, an improving Pittsburgh. They're going to have a really hard time coming out of that division as the division winner this year.
Well, you know how I feel about that AFC Championship game. I don't think Tyler Boyd could have more impact than the refs in that game. They had T. Higgins, they had Jamar Chase in that game. Tyler Boyd was in for part of it. I don't think Tyler Boyd, unfortunately for him, would have made that much of a difference. So, sorry, Tyler.
I've defended you in the past. Game.
For those two teams, it was relatively low scoring.
43 total points. I feel like that would have been vastly under as far as gambling would have went. But so I just pulled up the win probability for this game, and the entire game the Chiefs had it until about 2 minutes left in the fourth, and that's when the Chiefs grabbed the win probability back, and then the Chiefs overtook them in the last 2 minutes again. So the Chiefs vastly dominated this game, regardless of refs or no refs or Tyler Boyd or no Tyler Boyd. Unless he's playing defense and getting them the ball back, I don't see it.
I don't think he would have made that much of a difference, unfortunately. Sorry, Tyler, but you just gave the Chiefs bulletin board material, so you kind of
stomp them.
Yep.
They will stomp them. Oh, so moving from one bulletin board to a potential another one, this bulletin, though, might result in the highest contract for a non-quarterback. Do you have any guess who that would be?
It's clearly going to be Justin Jefferson. He is the most exciting wide receiver in the entire league. Yes, Jamar Chase is fantastic, and he's right up there near him. But Justin Jefferson is the entire Vikings offense. And I don't think Jamar Chase, I don't think Devontae Adams, I don't think any of these other top guys can say the same.
Yeah, and sadly though, over the next couple of years, I don't know who's going to be throwing Justin Jefferson the football.
They're going to be stuck with Kirk Cousins forever.
I mean, I'm okay with that because he gets Justin Jefferson the football.
I don't know if Vikings fans are okay with never winning a championship, but fantasy fans are going to love getting all those stats.
I think there's a lot more fantasy fans than there are Minnesota Viking fans.
Oh, that's fighting words, man. That's fighting words.
But I do think he deserves it, and he's skipping voluntary OTAs right now. And that's telling me that he's really serious about getting this new deal done. And that's what he's telling the front office as well, is that this deal is really important for him to get done. I could see players like T. Higgins follow suit because Joe Burrow's contract's still not done yet. And that is a prerequisite for T. Higgins' deal to start to be talked about. At some point, you got to put your foot down. And Justin Jefferson did it first. And I don't think this is hostile or anything like that. But there is no reason for Justin Jefferson to risk any injury until this new deal is signed.
I think that the Bengals should trade Higgins for Justin Jefferson. That's what I think. Get the LSU band back together.
How would they sign Jefferson, Chase, and Burrow?
I'm sure they'd do it. I'm sure Burrow would be like, "Oh crap, I'll take a lot less to get Justin Jefferson." Woo! Can they get my LSU top receivers back?
Can they just punt on defense then? Because that's basically what they'd be doing.
Yeah, who needs defense when you can score 50 points a game?
Each get 2 touchdowns a game.
Just make all your draft picks from now on all defensive players. You'll eventually hit on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Justin Jefferson would really quickly be able to pick up the playbook because they could just go back to the LSU playbook.
Yep. Well, speaking of playbooks, Jeff, Kenny Pickett left his purse in the car and got his playbook stolen. So
Kenny Pickett carries a purse. That's the first thing that I heard on that.
He pulled up in a gas station. He left his purse in the passenger seat. Somebody came up while he was pumping gas and just pulled it right out of his car. No, I think he had a window smashed and his car was parked somewhere and someone stole his stuff and his playbook was in there too.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. So his vehicle was taken during an hour-long appearance on a local sports radio show. It's just really, I think the car and the playbook were returned to Pickett. How long was the playbook gone for? A couple of hours? A few hours? Is that enough time to go to your local Kinko's and make a photocopy of the entire playbook and sell it to the Ravens and sell it to the Bengals and sell it to the Browns? Any other team that wants to play them. I don't think it's a very good look that he left his playbook unattended. Because what if he just left his car open and someone just went and snagged it and returned it without him even knowing it? Like, there's a lot of risk there. I think it says a little bit about Pickett's responsibility and leadership. I don't really want to dig too far into that, but it does have me side-eyeing him a little bit on that because he's the quarterback, the CEO of the team. He's the guy that's supposed to make everyone's jobs easier. And now the team is probably thinking, like, do we need to redo this? Do we need to redo that in the playbook? Like, they're really thinking about what might be missing or stolen out of that playbook now, and when they should be actually installing an offense at this point.
So let me ask you this, Jeff. I don't think it's that much like top secret information. It's not like government secrets, military secrets, anything like that. It's a football game, and people can learn a lot of the playbook stuff from watching game film and stuff like that too. But if you were a decision maker for the Carolina Panthers, if you were a head coach or defensive coordinator or something like that, how much would you pay for an opponent's playbook?
I would pay as much as I had to win that game, because once it's released, like, is it really cheating at that point? I don't think it's cheating if it's in public circulation. They could just as easily change their playbook. And I don't think that the big deal is the plays that they normally run. But let's say when they get to the back of the playbook and they see the annexation of Puerto Rico in there and the Statue of Liberty play, those are the plays that, like, a coach would call out in random times that if they had that playbook, they could see, like, that formation coming and such. So it does take away some advantages that the Steelers might have had otherwise, and they're probably going to have to rewrite some of their playbook.
Yeah, it's just a bonehead move from a young guy to have something like that in his car. It also makes me wonder if he's actually reading it, if he's just keeping it in his car the entire time.
Osmosis.
I mean, wouldn't you want it at your house where you could sit down, be comfortable, and like read it?
No, he sleeps with it right next to his bed, so like osmosis at night, it just comes over to his
under
head.
your pillow. Under your pillow.
Yep.
All right. Speaking of coaches that did some shade stuff, John Gruden working with the Saints to help Derek Carr and the team transition to him. So he came in for, I think it was 5.5 hours with the Saints coaching staff and talked them through everything that Derek Carr does well and like how to get the best value out of him and things like that, which is weird to me because you would think if I'm a team and I bring in a quarterback, I should already be armed with as much information before I even sign him, let alone well after I sign him, bring in a coach who's no longer in the league to talk to me about him. That's really strange to me. Jeff, what do you make of this?
Yeah, exactly what you said. It is strange that they didn't do their due diligence ahead of time. I do like the fact that they've done it now because John and Derek, they go back way far. Like Derek didn't want John to be fired from the Raiders. They had a really good relationship, installed an offense together. It kind of makes me wonder if the Saints are going to offer Gruden some sort of deal at some point. Obviously, they paid him for his time as a consultant here, or at least they should have. What happens to Gruden now? Because I don't think that the Saints offense is fine with Dennis Allen. I think that they need to get an offensive guru in there and like just even have him like an offensive guru, mastermind, whatever you want to call it, that position that's not like the coordinator or anything like that, but someone that's like a czar of the offense, just to overwatch the entire offense. And John Gruden might actually be that guy. Like, stranger things have happened, but I can't assume the league wouldn't want John Gruden back in the league. So obviously there's probably some hoops and red tape to clear up before that would ever happen. Do you think that this could lead to a John Gruden return to the league?
I think he should be back in the league. I think he'll probably be brought in at some point as a consultant, like offensive consultant on a permanent basis, and end up being in the coaching box, the coaching booth, whatever, and then at some point become the offensive coordinator or potentially head coach. But I think he'll be back in the league as an offensive coordinator relatively soon, next couple seasons.
Yeah, and I think the Saints are actually the best spot for him. In fact, he could easily become the interim head coach when Dennis Allen ultimately gets fired at some point.
If Dennis Allen doesn't do well this year with how easy that schedule is, I could definitely see him being fired.
Me too. All right, we got one last news item. We have an update on the gambling suspension that is upcoming. Alex, what is the update that you have for us on this here?
It is rumored to be another Detroit Lions player, and it just seems like it's someone that they missed on their first go around. I don't know if they've released the name of the person, but it doesn't seem like it's affected any other teams at this point. So your Carolina Panthers wide receivers are safe, Jeff, for the moment.
What's concerning, though, is it seems like this was mostly the wide receiver room for the Lions. So it makes me wonder what wide receivers are left. And when you start looking around the room, you'll notice who I'm talking about. And that's the guy that I wouldn't want to have suspended for this year.
DJ Chark?
Could be. But I was thinking about Amara St. Brown.
Well, it sounds like they could use someone like Hopkins then.
And maybe that's where your prediction of the Lions can come into effect, is they might have this massive need at wide receiver quickly.
Yep. So it's another situation to monitor. We'll see if it is Amon-Ra St. Brown, which would be devastating news to dynasty owners for this upcoming season, as well as really tank his redraft value if he is able to still play at some point this year. So we don't know who it is. So we don't know that it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like you said, if it's in the Lions room, how many wide receivers are left?
And I'm assuming it's a wide receiver just based on the reports of the initial report, all being wide receivers. So it's just a complete assumption. And I really hope it's not, because I think that guy is awesome. And I think he has awesome chemistry with Jared Goff. So
I mean, it could have been DeAndre Swift. It could have been why they traded him away, Jeff.
Maybe. That is very possible. But it does sound like it's a current Detroit Lion, though. It doesn't seem like it was like a former Lion or anything like that. So we will see. We will see.
Well, that does it for another episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you so much for listening or downloading this episode. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please leave us a comment and share the show. Every little bit helps.
As always, you can find us with our handle at N2EFantasy on Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Please give us a follow. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, it's truly never too early for fantasy football. Thank you again.
Bye, everybody.